Okay, Barbara Jean.
All right, I don't have a question, but I do have something I do want to share. On Tuesday night, on Tuesday evening, I was headed somewhere, and there's a curve around near McIntyre International Guard Base on the back side, and I don't know. My mind was somewhere else. I was thinking about a what if this or what if that. I know that that's what I was thinking about. What if this? What if that had happened? And so I was not paying attention. I was not, and so the curve goes that way, and you got to go that way because there's nothing that way but the air base. And my car went that way, and it happened so fast. I wasn't even afraid. You know that fear, but all I could think of was, oh no, you know. And then I was able. I was able to keep control of the vehicle, and you know I was going faster than I should have been around that curve because I wasn't paying attention. I was able to keep control of the vehicle and bring it back on the road, and head forward, and then strongly in me was pay attention, and so I knew that the message was not just for that moment that I veered off because I was thinking about what ifs. Because when you're thinking about what if this happens, what if that's, you're not attending to the moment. I wasn't in the now. I wasn't attending, and so I wanted to share that message with you because I know that it's not just for me; it's for all of us. Okay. We need to pay attention, attend to what's around us, not only in our personal lives, just in general. Because there are things that are being revealed, and if I'm thinking about what if I did this or what if I didn't do this, I'm creating something that doesn't even exist, So that's the thing that's been with me all week long. And so sometimes when I feel my mind straying to something that is a what if or why not, or something, I do what we did for when we brought balance and harmony from Abum. I just sit there and I breathe through my nose and breathe out through my mouth. I just do that a couple times, and then I know, because when you're breathing, and you have to think about breathe in through your nose and breathe out through your mouth, it puts you right there. You don't have to do that long, but that thought just flitted away. And so just pay attention, guys.
Okay. Makes all the sense in the world to me, especially in my week. I've been thinking about things that's been going on this week, and I've been thinking about them in relationship, of course, to humanity, but more particularly to what we are dealing with currently in this country. And I thought about that, and while you were talking, something came to mind, and what it is that I remember once when Malcolm said the chickens had come home to roost when Kennedy was assassinated. And now I'm looking at what's happening, but I'm seeing it differently. I'm seeing it from the perspective of the scripture that says, he who heareth me but doeth not is like a man that without foundation built his house upon the earth or the sand, against which the stream did beat vehemently, and immediately it fell, and the ruin of the house was great. This is not literally talking about a house, but it's talking about what your foundation is structured, is built on. What is it that supports your foundation? And I thought about that in relationship to the foundation of this nation being built on slavery, being built on something that's not solid, being built on something that will not support it. If you think about the foundation, we often talk about building a strong foundation. You know, make sure your foundation is strong. However, more importantly than, or just as important as your foundation being strong, is what is your foundation sitting on. It doesn't matter how strong the foundation is, if that which is beneath the foundation is not capable of supporting what you're going to put on the foundation. And when we talk about the strength of this nation, this world, we're talking about its foundation. We're talking about, when I hear people talk about how strong America is, I think about its foundation. And the strength of its foundation is not slavery. The strength of America's foundation is money. It's capitalism, it's finance. And because the strength of the country is based upon what it can do to debase or destroy other nations. And all it comes back to finances. However, when you look at what those finances are built on, that foundation of finances, what did it come from? It came from the dehumanization of a whole group of people. And I omit saying race for a purpose because it's a made up thing. A whole group of people. And when it's built upon the dehumanization of a group of people, it doesn't matter how strong the people are who have been dehumanized. It's not built on them in terms of their cultural or their spiritual beliefs. It's built on their backs in a negative way by debasing them. And when I look at that in relationship to what's transpiring, I see the fragility of the nation. And in looking at the fragility of the nation, I see the fragility of Europe as well. More particularly in Europe, I see the fragility of England when it comes to Boris Yeltsin having won the election, and him being the equivalent to Trump, but a bit more intelligent than he is. A bit more subdued in the way he manipulates, a bit more politically astute than Trump is. Yet, both of them are in the same place. And what I mean by that is that keep in mind that the institution of slavery did not start in America in 1619. The institution started in Portugal, because the enslaved people who were taken from, who were sold in this country first, were taken from a Portuguese ship that had been raided by pirates, and the pirates sold them. They took them from the Portuguese ship and sold them in Virginia. So what I'm saying is that even though that transpired prior to, England and America were built on the slave trade and the institution of slavery. So I'm seeing this as the foundation sitting on something that cannot hold. And now we're beginning to see the cracks in the foundation. Now, don't get me wrong. I see a part of that foundation as being the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, etc. And the Constitution within itself is a document that, if applied properly, is a very strong document when it comes to humanity, if it's applied properly. Now, I see that the the two nations, England and America, are being laid bare, because right now, when you look at the British Kingdom, I'm sorry, when you look at Great Britain, you include Ireland and Scotland. And Ireland and Scotland are making efforts to detach from England in order to stay in the EU. So we have land naked. The emperor has no clothes, England and America. And I see both of them teetering on disaster at the same time. And I feel like we are in the midst or in the process of experiencing something that is greater than the history that we have seen in the past. And what I'm saying is that if we just look at it from historical perspective of growing pains in what is called a democracy, that's one thing. But when we look at it in relationship to the Roman Empire and how the Greek Empire and how they crashed, how they were shattered. Now we're looking at the shattering of a cultural civilization, not civilization itself, but a cultural civilization. And the cultural civilization of which I speak is based upon capitalism and racism. That, see, we look at these isms as being political policies, but they're not. Racism is ingrained in the culture of this earth. So when we look at look at this cultural civilization, I see that there are cracks in it, and it's beginning to fall apart. So we are witnessing the demise, the death of a civilization, and the resurrection of another. Any questions about this? Am I making sense?
Yes.
So what I am saying is that while it said that Nero Philip played while Rome burned, the church is playing games while America crumbles. The church, the religion is making every effort to prop up what this cultural racism or this cultural civilization of racism. However, it's not going to work. And one of the reasons I understand that it won't work is because of what was written in Christian Today, that magazine, because of what was written there. What they're not talking about, they're talking about Donald's immorality, but they didn't talk about the paragraph in there, the sentences in there where he addressed racism, and the racist nature of Trump was also addressed in that. They're not talking about that aspect of it, but it doesn't matter, it's out there.
Right.
Now the other part of that is this. My heart goes out for the African in the church. And the reason it does is because the African in the church has worn and embraced the banner of racism blindly for so long until it cannot see that it is keeping itself in bondage. And when the foundation of this cultural, racist civilization begins to crumble, the African is going to be caught up in it as well, because the universe does not distinguish between those who know better and those who don't, and especially if you don't seek to know better. And I see the the Caucasian church, and I talk about that. I'm talking about the church worldwide religion. I'm not talking about just in this nation. I see it crumbling because first of all, the mother of evangelicals is in this country. That's where it was birthed. I see that crumbling. But what happens if you are attached to something and you are so blindly attached to it until you think you're separate from it? What happens to you when it dies? You know, it's like the moss on a tree. Evangelicals is the tree, and the African religious Christian person is the moss. It is feeding off that tree. So what happens when the tree dies, and the moss doesn't have anything else to nourish it? How much more difficult is it to pick up the pieces if you have put all your eggs in the basket of Christianity and you find out it is not what you thought it was, and you don't know what to replace it with. You don't know what it should be. You don't know what it should look like. Oh, how much more difficult is it for you to, at some point, pick up the pieces and begin to make an attempt to establish the true nature of what this thing we call religion is supposed to be? How difficult is it to do that? Well, and I believe that the difficulty in doing it does not rest on the shoulders of those who are attached to this system. I believe that it rests on the shoulder of those who are the ones who are searching for truth and traveling a journey based upon truth, regardless of the pitfalls that's in front of us. I believe that it's upon the shoulders of the African to pick up the pieces for those who cannot see. Why? Because we cannot pick up the pieces after the institutions of racism fail, because the ones who instituted racism are the ones who have to end it. And the ones who institute it are not going to be able to pick up the pieces for the African who feels as though it has been destroyed based upon its connections to Christianity, because it's floundering and it doesn't know which way to go. It doesn't know what to look to. And the Caucasian it cannot pick up the pieces for the African because it does not understand the African. It's going to have to be the African who pick up the pieces and bring things back to a place of stability. And I'm not talking about by virtue of going from place to place, speaking about how the puzzle should be put together, speaking about the deception that we have lived for so long. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about putting it back together by virtue of, by way rather, of the spiritual, by the same way that we institute change through our spiritual desires and meditations. This is the way that all of this is going to have to be brought back together. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Any questions or comments? So I believe that it is incumbent upon us not only to lay the foundation, but it is incumbent upon us to be the rock upon which the foundation rests. And I don't think that that the idea of the foundation of faith, I don't think that was haphazardly chosen, even though at the time it appeared to be simply a name as opposed to an action. I believe that when people are in search of self, and then it is at that time that we're going to have to make sure that we are doing exactly what Barbara spoke about earlier, paying attention. We're going to have to make sure that we're paying attention to everything around us. Why? Because if we are not paying attention to what's happening around us, then the blood of those who are unable to get to a place of stability will be on our hands, because we profess to have the authority, understanding, and desire to be the burden bearers for humanity. And if the womb of humanity remains unstable, which is the African, then humanity will never be stabilized. Questions? And I know I've said a mouthful, but this is what I'm seeing, and I see it. I see it with a greater clarity than most things I've seen, and what's resting heavy on me is making sure that we understand that the scriptures are not for church. The scriptures are not for religion. The scriptures are for life. It's for the life of humanity. And the book is not about praise and worship in the sense that we do that. The book is about praise and worship in the sense of the true understanding of it. Adoration for the creation, at the same time surrendering to the principles of the Creator, because it doesn't talk about you cannot say that I surrender to my Creator and not surrender to the principles, because they are the same. What did Jesus say? He said that but he that heareth and doeth not is like a man without a foundation built on sand. What is he saying? If you hear these words and you don't put them into action, you don't put these principles into action in your life, then you're unstable. Now, how can you make these principles a reality if you don't know what they are? I see this as a parental thing, a parental action. It's like the parent trying to get the children to see that life is not always kind to you, and understanding how to live by the principles that will give you not only stability but also will give you the confidence to hold on to them, or the faith, or to hold on to them until you get to the place where you don't need faith anymore, because you know it's true, and knowing, the knowing is greater. And I see it as that we have to continuously make the connection between the book and the principles of this kingdom that we are seeing acted out or played out in this earth. Example of what I'm saying is that you see the visions in what's happening in this country politically. This is simply a spiritual reality being played out before our eyes. That's all. The idea of Baal being impeached, the idea of the unripened one being impeached, and the idea of the unripened one being undergirded by the unripeness of racism, the unripeness of greed, and at the same time, that portion of the other side is not in tune with what really is taking place. However, they are a tool. They are being used effectively by our Creator to bring about the change that's necessary, or to bring about the exposure that's necessary. I see a weakening of all of the institutions, and when you think about it, there are three institutions that governs this nation: the Congress, the judiciary, and the executive. And the three that governs this nation, and all three of them are weakened now. And things that are weakened, if you don't effectively put something in its place, then when it regains its strength, it is worse than what it was in the beginning. So it's imperative that not only must we perceive the weakness of it, we must seek the destruction of it, so that it can be reordered in such a manner that it is beneficial to the whole of humanity, as opposed to being beneficial to a handful who manipulates humanity. I saw an article where this lady was speaking concerning Pete Buttigieg having wine in the cellar, fundraiser in the wine cellar. I saw a response to that. One of the actresses said that the billionaires have as much right to decide who's going to be president as does a waitress or a plumber. And the response to that was, when the waitress or the plumber has the means to buy access to a politician, then that would make sense. But one billionaire buys more access to the politician than all the plumbers in America can get. So what I'm saying is that these things are being exposed for a reason. These little tweets that seem some hilarious, some appearing to be innocuous, but they are not. They are meaningful, and when we are paying attention, the Creator will show us how to sift through them, so we can see what's pertinent and what's not. Because there are a lot of things out there that are designed to keep you off balance. There are a lot of things out there that are designed to bring about the confusion. So it is imperative that we are dependent on our Creator to make sure that we are able to bring these things to a place of balance.
While you were talking, I saw the birthing of a nation. How does that relate to what's happening now?
I would put re in front of that.
Rebirthing.
Yeah, because the nation was birthed, and it has been birthed, but it was birthed without being fully mature. It was a preemie. It came into existence without being fully mature, and I don't mean in terms of limbs and legs, but I'm talking about its mentality. Mm-hmm. It never developed beyond selfishness. So with the rebirth of the nation, it will develop beyond selfishness. You see what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
So it's like a child.
Right.
Children are selfish.
So what's happening now is birth pains? That's that we're experiencing?
Yes.
Okay.
That's your, what's that hand? Mm-mm. Oh, okay. No. So I see that it's necessary for us to pay attention to what's going on. There are always pains with change. Yeah. There's always pain. So I've never looked at this particular scripture the way I see it now. I've always talked about the foundation, but not about what the foundation rests upon. That's the key. Mm-hmm. That is the key.
So what is the scripture you're reading from?
Luke 6, 48, 49. Okay. That I've not seen it that way. So what I'm saying is that the whole the foundation is not being replaced, removed, or however you want to term it, but the rock or the thing that the foundation sits upon is the thing that's the most important. Any questions about that? Any
When
comment?
you talked about, when you mentioned the womb of Africa, and that things had to be righted, did you mean can you just enlarge on that a little bit?
Yes. When I talk about the womb of Africa, I'm talking about the womb from which this rebirth has to take place. The principles that we live by, the principles that were established in these scriptures or in the holy book of all people, at least for that matter. And the example, one of the things that brought this idea the understanding or brought this question about the womb of Africa being the source of this rebirth is that Miss World, Miss America, and Miss Universe.
Miss World, Miss US.
Yeah, it's four of them. But anyway, all of them are African females. You see,
Miss Teen.
Miss Teen, yeah. All of them are African females. That's not coincidental. That's what I'm talking about. We see the rise of feminine energy in terms of manifesting what we have been searching for, talking about, Obama talking about, if women, if females were in authority in the world in 2 years, everything would be different. You know, that kind of thing. The problem with it is that old men won't move out of the way. Yeah, you know, that kind of thing. And now keep in mind, when he said old men won't move out of the way, I don't only see that Caucasian male as being an old man in the way. That African male that's in that pulpit is in the way also. You see? So, but he takes his cues from the Caucasian male. So so when I talk about that womb, I'm talking about a womb that is fertile, and a womb that has gone through its menstrual cycle and is now ready for birth. And I believe that these four females, all of them are young, and four is the number of creation. So to bring things to a place of balance is coming from this womb that is fertile. Up to this point, the womb has been barren, and the reason it has been barren is because it has not been properly attended to. We have allowed this system of manipulation through Christianity to fester to the point where the feminine is represented by the ones who aged out with frustration. I know there is something better. I'll give you an example. The aging, I was talking about people like Miss Florence who grew older looking for a change. I know there's something better, but not really knowing what the better thing is, but aging out. And now, but at the same time, releasing wisdom, but not understanding the depth of the wisdom that they were presenting. But now that young womb has come on the scene, and now it is time for it to bring about this rebirth, so that this sense of balance and the reality of nurturing can be realized. Because truly, it is no coincidence that up until a few years, about 25 years ago, up until that point, we were the nurturers of all the Caucasian children. We were the babysitter. up until about 25 years ago. That's no coincidence. We are the nurturers of the earth for humanity. And it's not difficult anymore for me to embrace that, for me to believe it with everything in me, that we are the nurturers of humanity. And again, I reiterate, the reason I serve as covering is not because I know everything or better than anyone. It's not it at all. Men messed it up. Men got to fix it. And that's a part of the fixing. And what is the part of the fixing? The understanding, as Obama said, that when females are in charge, when females are in a place of authority, everything is much better because they are nurturers, and that has to come because not that that male has to be submissive in terms of a sense of weakness, but no, being strong in terms of understanding of what it is supposed to be about, as opposed to trying to run in its lane and everybody else's lane too. So we understand that we must stay in our lane, and when that happens, everything works better. This guy asked me on Monday night, why is it, how is it that the moon has an effect on humanity? And my response was that the moon is feminine. And if you really think about the femininity of the moon in relationship to the menstrual cycle up until chemicals were put in the body were regulated by the moon. And the whole idea of lunatic comes from moon. And then he says, so if that's the case, then why is it that the moon, being feminine, receives its light from the sun? Why is it that it doesn't have its own light? What do you think my response to that was? The reason it doesn't is because wisdom is dark. Wisdom is feminine and it's dark. And the light is simply understanding that wisdom. So when males get to the place, son, where they understand that wisdom, then the light, they become light as opposed to the darkness that it is now. And I mean that darkness in a unripened way. Because there are many, there are multiple understandings of darkness in the Eastern cultures. Darkness is wisdom, but darkness is also confusion. So it depends on the context that is used there. So these kinds of questions are coming because there is something in the macro that's prompting these questions. Evelyn? Oh, I thought you. Okay. Any questions or comments? Now, I want you to understand something. I don't have a protracted message. And when I get to the place to stop, I'm going to stop unless there are questions. But I do want us to make sure that we pay attention, because if we're not paying attention, we're blind, right?
Yeah.
And the blind can't lead the blind. That's both of them falls in the ditch, right?
Yep.
So if we're not paying attention, we're just as blind as those who don't understand the nature of truth, or don't understand spirituality. If you're not paying attention, because the same thing can happen to us when we are not paying attention as happens to those who don't know where they're going. Does that make sense?
It does.
Because when the example that Barbara was using about the curve in the road, right? The whole example about that is the same thing could happen to someone who did not know the road. and you've traveled it before. You know the road, but yet this happened. I do believe that this was for, us in this present time to make sure that regardless of what's going on, that we pay attention, because there are things that happen in our lives and to people who we are close to that will distract us if we're not careful. And regardless of how painful it is, we have to understand that it is a distraction, and live with the attitude, this too shall pass. While we remain focused, and we cannot be judgmental and critical of those who don't understand, because what we are trying to do is take a speck out of our brother's eye when we have a log in our own eye. What he's saying is, you don't be judgmental about people, because when you're judgmental, what you're actually doing, you're actually seeking to take the speck out of your brother's eye when you don't see at all. Because if you see at all, then you understand that you're not to be critical or judgmental. Just because you can recite some truth does not mean you see it. But when you employ it in your life, that's the seeing it, So we have to make sure that we operate under the banner of kingdom principles, that our lives are governed by kingdom principles, as opposed to the principles of this earth consciousness, because they don't work. They don't work. They serve more to divide us than they do to bring us together as one. Questions?
Hey, Pastor.
Yes, ma'am.
This is Jana. So, I had a couple things too as y'all were talking. Some I didn't realize. So I think it was either Tuesday or Wednesday. I was in an accident as well. It was very minor. Oh, sorry, Alexa's listening to our conversation, so excuse her. Alexa, Amazon, stop. Sorry. Okay. So I was on the freeway, the stop and go traffic, and I had moved from the middle lane, the carpool lane, to the next lane over. And that was fine. That move was fine. And then I was looking over to the right to try to get into the next lane to get off. And I heard behind me, again, this is all stop and go traffic, I heard a bang. And I thought, wow, was I hit? I said, I didn't feel hit. And then a couple seconds or whatever, it feels long when you're in it. I felt a bump and heard another bang. And so I thought, oh, no, because I realized someone behind me had been hit and then had hit me. And so I turned on the blinkers, and we were in this very busy traffic, and that person didn't get out of their car, I didn't get out of mine. I called the police, to try to get some help. And they advised me if I could get safely over to the side, do that. So at some point, someone way behind me realized I was trying to get over, so they slowed traffic down. And then the person behind me came over. And then I realized the third car hadn't come over. So I thought there were 3 cars. And so I found out at some point during all of this that the guy behind me had been rear-ended and rear-ended me, which is what happened. To me, that talks about, the impact you're saying of things on the womb or on the blacks who have bought into religion. It's like we were on the freeway driving, and we were impacted. Someone who was impacted as well. There's this cause and effect thing that keeps happening. That I didn't blame the guy behind me who hit me. I didn't even really blame the other guy. I didn't feel upset or anything. It was just this idea that sometimes you're caught in these eddies of action and reaction. And all I remember thinking about it was, well, it's okay. No one was hurt, and it was actually very, very slow speed. But my thought was, in that I had done everything I could do. I had safely moved over. I had been very careful about my trying to get into the other lane. I'd done everything I thought I needed to do to be safe, and yet you still end up in these cases where you've done all you can, and there's still this cause and effect that you're caught up in as well. So that was just interesting to me with the cars, this idea of the lessons there. And then the other was, I've been reading this book called Braiding Sweetgrass. I don't know if I've shared that with this group. And I thought it was about these Gullah women in Charleston, because, sweetgrass baskets are big in Charleston. So I thought I was going to be listening to this black woman talk about stories about Africa and about sweetgrass. And it's this, I was listening to it, and I realized first away it wasn't a black woman. I'm like, what am I listening to? And she's got this real soft voice. And I looked her up and I listened, and I had to get over my own initial reaction, which was almost a racist reaction, because or not racist per se, but I was expecting one thing. So when I saw the picture of her, she looked pretty white, and I thought, what? And then I found out her grandfather was Native American, and she was raised in that culture. And I had initially made a judgment on her based on her looks instead of on what she was saying. But as I listened to what she was saying, and she's a botanist, but she's also learning from the spiritual teachings that were here before America became America. I was surprised at how open I was to imagining a picture, a version of life here that's nothing like the capitalist one we live in, because she goes back to the old teachings of trade, of reciprocity, of gifting, of how the world gifts to us and how we gift back. What we do, what the world does, is kind of symbiosis. And, for a long time, you and I have talked to myself, I don't know how life could be better. But listening to her, it was the first time I thought, this is a better I've never realized, I've never even imagined, because it's so far out of my idea of gain, climb the corporate ladder, what have you. This idea that even in my very actions of how I spend my money in this case, because that's really where I can affect change. I influence this openness of gifting and loving in my in everything I do. And she uses the nature to show this. She uses how plants react to each other or to us, or how, because she's a botanist, how all these things are all connected, and they're all about everything helping the other, all these organisms. I mean, she even talks about how in Native American culture, rocks were considered people, trees were considered people. And she said, if we thought about, all of these, the earth and all of these other species as their own peoples, how differently would we interact with them than thinking of them as objects and resources that we can use the way we want. So kind of what you're talking about reminds me of what she's saying, that there's, that there's this peopling of all these species on the earth that have all come together to help each other and to help each other grow. And it's a very different, it's hard to explain, but it's a very different way of looking at living and living in this world that I've known from anything I've ever thought about. But it's also an ancient teaching from a spiritual people that's not really here. I feel like Africa is the womb. I feel like Native American culture in some ways was part of that spirit that's been tamped down, But anyhow, that's it. I just, things that occurred to me as the discussion has been going.
As a matter of fact, Native American spirit is a part of that. that, first of all, capitalism is something that came into existence really during slavery. However, the only capitalists are poor people. Wealthy people are socialists. Because they are the ones who get all the perks and support from the government, and poor people are left to fend on that for themselves. If you own a business and your business begins to lose money, then you're on your own. However, look at what happened with Bank of America got bailed out. So we, the capitalists are actually wealthy people. The other thing about that is this, and what Randy was talking about, there was no such thing as ownership in terms of land or animals for that matter. It was everything belonged to everyone until the Caucasian came into the picture, and the efforts of colonization was that you take the land and own it and force them to do what you want them to do. Case in point, why is it so much starvation? It's because the people who were living in the manner that they had lived for thousands of years were forced to change the way that they live, and their land was taken. So, and then they had to go to a store to buy food as opposed to raising their own food. So this is done. Of course, that's a simple version of it, but this was done on purpose. But what I'm saying is that all of this has to change, and we are in the midst of that change, and the things that Randy was talking about, they are distractions. They truly are. I mean, Wednesday, Craig's wife got hit in traffic. I came across 2 lanes and T-boned her, and they were going in the same direction. It was like, he was high probably based on the conversations that he had. But anyway, another distraction, So what I'm saying, I guess, is that these distractions are not going to be things that we can simply brush off. Because if you can simply brush it off, it's not the real distraction. And something that's a major distraction to you may be nothing to me. You understand? Yeah. So we have to be cognizant of that as well. So I guess the bottom line with in talking to us as as journeymen, I should say, maybe I don't know what to call it, but talking to us as a group is make sure that we are not hypocritical. Make sure that we are who we say we are. Make sure that we are not on this stage of life and pretending to be something that we're not. Make sure that your mouth is speaking what your heart believes, and you are bringing into manifestation the principles that your life is based upon. If your mouth does not speak what your heart believes, you're lying to yourself. And when you lie to yourself, who is it that you can be truthful with? Because if you can't be true to yourself, who can you be truthful with? And simply because you don't understand something or you misspeak doesn't mean that you're lying. I'm talking about, we know right from wrong. We know what the principles are. And I'm not talking about in terms of reciting them. I'm talking about living them. What is the major principle? Love thy neighbor as thyself, and love the Lord thy God with all thy soul, thy heart, and thy mind. All the commandments hangs on this. That's the reality. If the idea of love is more than simple affection shown. The idea, the concept of love is loving somebody as you love yourself, is embracing humanity just like humanity is you, because it is. And the embracing of it goes much further than what we see as missionary work, that kind of thing. It's much, much, much more than mission work. This mission work is just busy doing pretty much nothing. It really is. So so we have to look beyond, beyond that, and see it for what it is. Any questions?
Just a comment, as Rainey was talking about something she read, and we were talking about foundations and what a foundation is. What is the foundation sitting on? One of the things I read this week related to child care credits, and how some poor people are too poor
Yeah.
to take advantage of the higher child care credit.
Yeah.
Whereas if you made a lot of money, you could get the more.
Right.
It just seems so ridiculous in terms of the rules that were set in place. It is so far from the concept that she was talking about. It was discussed.
But you ask yourself, what is the advantage to a nation to make sure that people stay poor? What is the advantage?
Right.
Why would you want to do that? Why would you want people to live with bad health because they can't get health care? Why?
But the advantage is that those in control would receive more money, and from a feminine perspective, a feminine energy type would see what you're talking about. The advantage of nourishing everyone so that the whole benefits. But it's those old men who are greedy. That's the advantage for them. They always make more money.
I was reading an article on economics, and the person later premised that in a truly capitalist society there would be 0 billionaires. In a truly capitalist society, and the way he talked about it, it made sense. Inside trading, you're a billionaire. You buy people in government to make sure that you get what you want in terms of contracts, you become a billionaire. So he went, down the line, naming the things. However, in a truly capitalist society, the competition would be so great. But when you only have competition at the bottom and none at the top, then it is easier to manipulate people. And that's where we are right now. I also was reading about how in markets, housing markets, where houses are overpriced. Like, for example, in Bethesda, Maryland, the average, the median house is like $1.4 million, and it's actually worth $900,000. So it is a couple $100,000 overpriced, and it went down the list. So if you know that, why do you allow it to happen? If you know that, because of greed.
And the benefit.
It's like, and when I say this, I may be finished, I don't know. It's like credit scores. Credit scores are designed to do two things: to keep you in debt, and to make up a reason for not allowing you to borrow something. credit scores were put in place for us.
And then they use them for things beyond borrowing.
Yes, they use for jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they use for car insurance. So it's designed for that. So if you are minimum wage, you gonna have issues paying your bills. So that credit score keeps you there. Then go ahead.
It's a soapbox about data, and I don't want to take us too far off topic, so wait.
Go ahead.
What'd you say, sweetie?
You mentioned credit scores and insurance companies, and our car insurance is kind of high because Bill is in your driver, blah, blah, blah. And they offered us the little thing you can put in your car that will basically record your driving habits and potentially lower your rate. And the guy said, as long as you aren't driving at like 3 o'clock in the morning or, taking off really fast at a green light, you should be fine. And I told Phil, I was like, I don't think that's a good idea because we don't know what they're going to do with the recorded data. There could be an incident that happens somewhere and you just happen to have your car parked in the wrong place, and then suddenly you're caught up in a criminal incident that you have nothing to do with. Because companies like to tell you that they're not going to share your data with anyone, but the government can always get it. Amazon Alexa is always on. It's always recording. There are human beings that listen to it later, but they don't tell you that. It's a personal soapbox for me. So it's not just credit scores. It's lots of stuff, and they will use it against us.
I mean, they are. So this is what I'm talking about. These are the fissures that's in the foundation of this nation, world, whatever. These are it's being fractured now because everything is being exposed. That's the only time that things change. Example, the very entity that was brought into existence in late 1870s, to protect people who were previously enslaved is being used to prop up the criminality of Trump. The Justice Department was brought into existence for the protection of previously enslaved people. It was established to protect us from the Klan. And when you go down the line, you look at what used to be HEW, Health, Education, Welfare. That was established for the purpose of enabling previously enslaved people to get on their feet. And you can go down the line with these agencies that were established. As a matter of fact, Harriet Tubman is the one who established it. It came from something called the Freedmen's Bureau. The Freedmen's Bureau morphed into Health, Education, and Welfare. So what am I saying to you? These foundational things for the benefit of humanity, they were put there or they were caused to be put there by people who were previously enslaved. Yet they have been used in a demeaning way. And then I hear all of these people talk about Christianity and how they're in love with Billy Graham. And he never spoke in favor of civil rights. He never spoke favorably about Martin Luther King. He never said anything positive about African Americans. But yet,
That's why he was America's preacher.
yes. And on his dying bed, he said, I wish that I had put a greater distance between me and politics. A little late for that, buddy. Yeah, so these are things, these are policies that people don't want to hear. Christian folk don't want to hear it. Church folk don't want to hear it. There are people who think that if you are not just talking about he got up early Sunday morning, that you are not dealing with the scriptures. You are not dealing with the scriptures if you cannot read the signs of the times. You're not dealing with the scriptures if you don't understand the historical nature of the manipulation of humanity. The scriptures deal with these things. And they have been overtaken by those who want to put them in a bottle and talk about how great Jesus Christ is. And your Lord and Savior. That's all they want. And if you're not talking about give your life to Christ, then something's wrong with you. This is not what it's about. And here we are, a people who are the most manipulated and the most demeaned, embracing it and swallow their hook, line, and sinker, as opposed to trying to understand what is reality in the book. We don't do that. And we judge everything based upon whose church you go to, or whether or not you even go. Everything based on that, and yet we're still doing the same old things, and yet expecting those who have questions to stay there when you're not getting answers. Nothing is changing. And I say to those who may be listening or looking at this tape, whatever, later on, this or hearing this conversation later on, please understand something. If you are not talking about what's happening to humanity in relationship to the scriptures, you are not doing what Jesus did.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what you say, you are not doing what Jesus did if you're not dealing with the plight of humanity, because that is what he addressed. And to the extent that Peter said, that Peter thought that he had come to overthrow Rome and establish a physical kingdom. He knew that he had come to shake things up, to establish a kingdom, but he thought it was this physical kingdom that Christianity supports that's in D.C. That's not what he's talking about. And for us to think that, and for us to have an allegiance to death, is sickening to me. When you look at the Christian flag and it has a cross on it, there is no life in the cross. The cross is death. You understanding this?
Yes.
So why would you have an allegiance to death when you are supposed to be about the establishment and perpetuation of life? When you're told that you are the light of this earth, you're the light of the world, yet you are embracing, you are perpetuating this thing called death. And I'm not talking about death in a physical way. I'm talking about death in a manner that separates in our minds us from our Creator. And whether or not you say I'm separate, if you're not doing, if you're not manifesting the principles, you're separate in your mind, because you created a God that does not exist, and there is a problem with that. So anyway, let me get off my soapbox. Any questions?
It's a soapbox morning.
Well,
Yeah.
going back to what Barbara Jean was saying about how we need to pay attention, and that also means that we should see, if we're paying attention, living in that moment, we can see the Creator moving. You know, because a lot of time we can get caught up in stuff, and I've asked the Creator while meditating, just let me hear you. And now that I've asked it, it has given that ability to me and has made me aware. In my life, I can just see the Creator moving.
And
If that makes sense.
it does. I mean, I think about it.
It really doesn't make sense. It resonates.
Okay,
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
thank you.
Which is a deeper.
Okay, thank you.
And which means it vibrates in rhythm.
Okay.
When we think about we look at people talk about how evil things are, and they see it in terms of somebody being against somebody, when that's not it at all. It's unripened thoughts that brings us to this place. It's thoughts that are not developed. It's immature thoughts that has brought us to this place and that keeps us here. And when they make fun of it and say that about Donald being the chosen one, he is. He is. He was chosen for such a time as this, for the benefit of humanity. Because you cannot benefit humanity if you don't know what needs to be fixed. So I don't ridicule the idea of him being the chosen one. I don't. We look at the thing, the chosen one. We look at it like it's going to be somebody that who breast smell like pet milk, and saying just do what the country says and God will change things. The president is put in place because of the Lord. No, that's not how it works. Israel did not know that something was wrong until they lived under Roman rule. That's when they began to see the corruption. So I am adamant about us understanding and seeing these things that are taking place as a not a sign, but a movement of our Creator. I mean, look at what's happening here. Nancy doesn't know what she's doing, but she knows everything she's doing. For her, nobody has ever put Mitch McConnell in the spot where he is now. When she said, we ain't going to send him.
You ain't gonna what?
We're not going to send them the articles of impeachment to you
Oh.
until you tell us how you going to run this trial. People see that as, well, she doesn't have anything. No. That's not it. If you look at history, these are the strongest impeachment articles that were ever written. And the most dangerous. This is something a female is doing. Feminine energy is controlling. You see, this thing is important, and if you don't have a crowd of witnesses, we're not going to do this thing. But guess what? What did this woman say? It doesn't matter. If you decide that you're not going to take this up, guess what? He still was impeached. Ain't got to live with that. You understand what I'm saying? This is a female. And the most ruthless person that has ever stood in the Senate is Mitch McConnell.
And I think what he expected was that this gets sent over and they would take maybe a day or so and then vote it and then off they're going to business as usual.
Right.
So,
He doesn't, this man is not dumb by any stretch of the imagination. But for him to say, I'm not impartial at all. Flesh and blood did not say that. No, he's too shrewd for that. That came from someplace else. But and we as a people, and when I say a people, I'm talking about humanity being spiritual or seeking spiritual understandings, ought to be able to see that. That he never would have said that on his own. Because he knew what that entailed. He knows what that oath is when you go into the Senate trial. He knows that you swear that you're going to be impartial. He knows that. So why would he say I'm partial? So I'm saying to you that all of these things are in our face. And this is not politics, people. This is a manifestation of spiritual truth that are being bringing to an end the manipulation of spirituality. This is what's happening. And the evangelicals the dude wrote what he wrote because He didn't write that because he loved you. He wrote that because he saw evangelical people leaving the church. He didn't write that because he felt that there was something mighty about it. No. Why did he wait till now? Why did he do it when before they were getting the judges, the Supreme Court? Why he didn't talk about the immorality then? How come he didn't deal with it prior to the election? How come they were silent then? And to sit there and say, I can put up with him doing that because there are policies that I'm adamant about. I am totally pro-life, and he was putting pro-life judges in. So what you are saying is, I can compromise everything that I believe in order to get what I want. If that is not hypocritical, what is it? And we got people of color who following this BS.
Yes, we do.
This is crazy. This is self-destruction. It makes no sense. These variables that are being presented to us are there for us to be able to read the signs of the times so we will know where we are. This is a marker as to where we are on this journey. And the gauntlet has been laid down by feminine energy to the masculine energy. So now you have been ruling man all this time, old man. So now let's see what old woman gonna do. That this is where we are. You go impeach a man for having sex,
Right.
and not impeach a man for threatening the nation.
Right.
That's crazy.
I see Elijah coming more powerful now than ever.
Oh, I do too. I felt that from the day he died.
Yeah, I mean,
So, and he was a master of what he does.
yeah, he
There's no
really
question
working.
about it.
Mhm.
First time I met him was doing that Genesis 16.
Mhm.
And to watch him in action live is a different thing than watching snippets on TV. But anyway, any questions?
Are you saying Nancy Pelosi is an old woman?
Older lady.
Well, like Elizabeth Warren said, she's the youngest woman who ever was the Speaker of the House.
She could. That's because she's the only woman.
Right.
But when I'm talking about older, as I said earlier, I'm talking about the wisdom
Yeah.
of it all.
Right.
No one could have done. Out of all the younger women who wanted that position, they were not shrewd enough to know how to do what she's doing. She knows the system.
Yep.
Moses knew the system.
Yep.
It's almost like a chess game, and she's a couple steps ahead.
Yes. So now what's your move? So and the other part of it is, do you think that the Creator is not still moving with Donald? How so? Everything she says, he get upset, and he goes further and further out there. You see,
Yeah.
and expose more and more and more, and put them in an awkward position. Like Lindsey Graham virtually said, "Just please shut up." Yeah, that's virtually what he said when he said you're not doing yourself any favors.
Yeah.
Well, he virtually said, "Please be quiet." But guess what?
All didn't know how to do that.
It's a great thing that he doesn't know how.
Yep.
Keep talking. That's how kingdoms crumble. When you think you got it all, that's how kingdoms crumble. And we are experiencing, we are witnessing the crumbling of a nation. Any questions?
What do you think of Nancy Pelosi doing this work, and your thoughts about Elizabeth Warren potentially becoming president, and the necessity of a Caucasian female dealing with Trump and the fact that Caucasian females put him in office and that kind of stuff.
Change has to be birthed by the ones who messed it up. And the man doesn't have the
What
womb.
was the question? Sorry.
long
What's
and
the question?
long and rambling question. I was asking about Nancy Pelosi and Elizabeth Warren and the necessity of a Caucasian female helping to correct, I guess, the election of Donald Trump.
What's wrong, actually?
What's wrong?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it's
Because this is much bigger than the election of Donald Trump.
right.
This is an assignment up to Donald Trump. It has to be the ones who messed it up. All the isms were birthed by the Caucasian. Capitalism, racism, they were birthed by Caucasian. So now, this manifestation of change has to be birthed the same way. Earlier, when I was talking about that, I was talking about when this thing falls apart, who's going to be left in pieces? The African, who's attached to Christianity. And the Caucasian is not going to be able to put the African back together. It takes the African to do it because the Caucasian does not understand the African culture. So it's going to take the African to do that. And we must do it in a meticulous way. And I'm not talking about, again, running around talking about, this is how we're doing it. I'm talking about desire, meditation. I'm talking about sincerity. I'm talking about living this thing from the depth of your soul. I'm talking about laying it all on the line for the cause of humanity. So, it's a long way since 2012, isn't it?
Oh my goodness gracious, yes.
Seemed like that was eons ago when we said not on our watch. And here we are. Okay, any other questions or comments? I'm going to be like the auctioneer. Going once. Going twice. We're done. I just don't have a gavel.
I don't think you need a gavel. We might have to take it away from you if you have one.
You were great up until now.